Hi, it's Gadget UK here again. Just thought to show you me fitting this stereo mod to Spectrum Plus 2A. As you can see, you can apply this to various other models as well. It'll do the Plus 2A, Plus 2B, Plus 3. It comes from a guy in the Netherlands. So just off camera there, you can see. Ben Versteeg. Yeah, nice chap. I'll post links and things. There's a URL there. You probably won't be able to. You might be able to read it actually from there. Yeah, you can. But I'll post the links and things on the description to this video. It's worth dropping him an email to see if he's got any of these left, because I know that this is one of the last of the old batch. But he did say, in fact, when I originally contacted him, he's like, "Oh, I've not got any left. You know, I've completely run out of stock, and I'm not going to do any more." And I was like, well, okay, well, you know, just bear me in mind, let me know if you do make, you know, if you change your mind, if you decide to do another run. And following that, he got back to me and, you know, said, no worries, look, I'll send you one of the last batch, I'm going to do another run. So, yeah, they might be on stock at the moment, but it's worth dropping him an email, because he will have some soon, so you could perhaps pre-order one or something, and just give him an indication of, you know, sort of quantities of these things that you might need to consider making. But it's well worth doing this, because not only does it give you stereo sound, and it's switchable, which I'll get onto in a minute. As you can see, there's two different ways you can actually mix the channels. That's a really nice feature. Didn't think that it would come with that. But as you can see, you get the fittings as well. So not only do you get the switch, you get the 3.5mm socket there. I can just pull my cable over. I'm assuming it is. Yeah. So standard headphones and things will work on that. Okay. Or a standard, you know, mixing cable or whatever to go to your, well, not mixing cable, but a standard cable to go to your audio amp or whatever it is you connect your sound to. But yeah, so the kit comes with everything you need, including a couple of extra resistors there that you need for the, I think the 2B and the 2A, 2B and 3. The jumper, this header here, is what you solder onto one of the chips, which I'll show you in a minute, and then you can solder it onto the board. What I'm going to do with this actually is I'm going to solder this. So it goes that way around. I'm going to solder it onto the board, but instead of soldering these onto the chips here, as it shows in the diagram, I'm going to put a pin header socket on the bottom, so you can actually disconnect this whole board. But I'll get onto that in a sec. So let's just have a look through some of the instructions here. There's a bit here about the mixing. I'll try and zoom in a bit. Not sure how clear it's going to come out. Yeah, so we're saying there's two common mixing standards. So you've got A, B, C. A is mixed to right, B is left and right, so that's your centre effectively, and C is the left, and he's put there that's Western European. And the other method is ACB, where A is to the right, C is the centre, and B is to the left. So that's interesting. I didn't expect that at all. Really don't understand. You know, he's been specific here, said Western European, Eastern European. I'm not really sure what that's all about. Other than Eastern European, I'm guessing it's going to be the Russian scene. Maybe they had their own little stereo boards that were manufactured around the time when these things were knocking around, and it was mixed a different way, and as a result, you know, any stuff that was developed for the Spectrum back then might use that mixing as opposed to whatever we used over here. Very strange, very interesting. Nonetheless, at least you've got a facility to do that, and you can do it with jumpers. It covers it a little bit here. Here's the jumpers. Or you can use the switch. Well, I'm going to use the switch because it just makes sense, really. I mean, obviously, you're still going to cut a hole on the back to mount this switch, but I'm going to be putting a hole anyway for the 3.5mm socket. May as well do the switch as well. So you got some nice pictures and things here, showing you know, dismantling and stuff, identifying where your AY chip is, and you can see it's got some pre-soldering going on here on the pins. There's actually 3 pins there on that first pin. So you're gonna, I think, presumably you've got A, B, C, and I'm not sure what the other one is. It might be a ground or something he's pulling from there as well. Yeah, mount your header on the chip. As I say, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to mount a socket there so I can actually detach it. But before I do that, I want to just get the lid off this and just make sure there's enough clearance inside for the additional height that a socket is going to, you know, add onto the end of this. Because whilst the pins there will fit snugly into that socket, it's probably going to be a millimetre or two higher, I would think, by the time I've got a socket on it. Yeah, and then solder the pins onto the chip. So you can see this isn't the problem there. The reason why I'm putting a socket on this, that it's all just going to be permanently on there. It's going to be a bit awkward to get the thing off if you needed to. Well, you could probably do it. You could probably get the clearance underneath there to get to the pins, or you could desolder the pins on the top of the board there, but I'd rather not do it that way, if I'm honest. And this only applies here, these two additional resistors that come with it only seem to apply to the 2A and 2B. I think I mentioned the 3 before, actually. It sounds like you don't need them on that, you just need them on the 2A, 2B. Not quite sure why that is. And he's got some suggestions here about marking the pins, pin 34. Is it pin 34? Yeah, 34 and 35 on your ULA. I'm not going to do that. I don't really like putting marks and things on chips, certainly not permanent ones like that. But yeah, it's a case of identify where pins 34 and 35 are and pulling a couple of wires off for that, and he's got the wire here. So it looks like, I need to check on the board, but it looks like it doesn't matter which way. In fact, yeah, I can see just from looking at this now, it looks like it doesn't matter which way around you get those two wires. Presumably they're both going to these two blocks of resistors here, which are the same size. I think they're just inverted in the orientation there. So it doesn't matter which way around you get those, and I'm guessing, just from my knowledge, my understanding of the ULA, I guess one of them is going to be the sound, your beep output, your standard, 48k mode output, if you like, and then the other one I think is going to be the tape output, audio input or whatever, so you can actually hear things loading. I guess that's what that's going to be. I'm not quite sure why that's circled there. I think that's just, it's just showing you that's 25, so that you can count up to work out where 34, 35 is. Yeah, so you solder your two wires on, and that's pretty much it. I think there's a subtle difference there on the 2A, 2B rather than sticking them on the chip. And this is something else I thought about. I might try and do this anyway. There must be other points that connect to those pin 34, pin 35, and that's what he's identified on a 2A and a 2B here. There's two caps, positions there. You can actually solder the two wires into rather than solder them onto the chip. The other alternative is if you get a longer wire, you could run it underneath the board and solder on the underneath of the board, and I might do that, to be honest, because I don't like really the thought of soldering on directly onto the ULA. I don't really like the idea of soldering onto the AY chip either, if I'm completely honest, but if I do it with a pin header, that should be alright. It gives me a bit of the ability there to just detach the thing and stuff, and I don't anticipate any problems. But the ULA, my mind, they're a little bit more fragile, let's say, so I won't be soldering directly onto the ULA. I don't think I'm going to solder onto the socket underneath. Yeah, so some instructions here on fitting drilling your hole to the right size for your 3.5mm socket, connecting up your jumpers if you want jumpers rather than a switch. That's pretty much it, I think. You've got another change there on a +3. Yeah, left leg 36, right leg of 34. So those are alternatives, replacements again for the ULA connections by the looks of things. It's got an example location here in a +2 grey, which is what I've got, of where to mount the socket there. So, and you can see a picture there with a switch above the new socket next to the old mono socket. So I think I'm going to go with that exact layout there. It seems to make sense to me. It's nicely, it's nice of him. He's actually put a little bit of code here as well. Basic, you just type in. And it's been that long. I knew you could use a play command to, output sound on the OPL there, but it's been a long time since I've done this, and didn't realise you could. It expects up to 3 parameters there, each for one for each of the channels. So he's just it's just playing the note at A on each of the individual channels there, and then beeping, and then going back round again. So that's quite a nice little test there to work it, to hear as it goes from left, centre, right, and then you should hear your beep, and I'm assuming that should be on both channels. I think that's the way it's merged. And you've got the little schematics here as well, with a little picture of the chip with the pin numbers and things on it, so that's like really nice. And it's dead simple. It's, as I explained, it's just using resistors here and a couple of caps as well, but mostly resistors to balance the audio, to mix them all to the relevant levels there. So it is pretty straightforward. But you could actually use that yourself if you wanted to make one of these yourself. But when you look at the cost, this has cost me, I think shipped, it was €13, which is about £7 or something. Well, the component costs here, one of those connectors off eBay, I doubt you might even get one of the exact size and dimensions. That's quite a nice socket that, you get cheap crappy ones from China on eBay, usually they'll be a quid each, and sometimes including postage. Same with the switch, you'd be lucky if you get one of those for a quid or two on eBay by the time it's shipped. And then you've got a bunch of resistors on there, some different sizes and things, a couple of caps, 4 caps actually, and then the pin headers and bits of wire and the assembly time and all the rest of it, I would say it's a bargain at you know, £7 or whatever it is. That is an absolute bargain. So yeah, it's not worth the effort trying to make one of these yourself, really. And it's elegant, it's tidy. You know, that's the reason I wanted to go for this. I could have done what I did with my ST, which is, you know, have a bit of breadboard and do exactly the same sort of thing. Use some resistors and caps and things on there to merge the channels and things and split the, you know, up to the left and right and have a centre channel and make it switchable, blah blah blah. But the bottom line is, with a bit of breadboard, you know, it gets a bit messy. This is a nice tiny little board he's manufactured here, and it's yeah, he's done quite a good job of that, I think. So the other thing we're going to have to do, and sorry, it's in the middle of all of this really, is that wire. Originally I had this wire when I did my composite mod, the video mod. I created a video cable, well, at the same time as I created a standard mono cable as well, which went to the 3.5-inch socket. Now you'll notice it's a stereo connector, but what I did inside it at this point in here, I just joined the two wires so both channels go the same way. So in other words, you know, it acts as a mono jack. But you know, obviously there's going to be stereo now, and I'm not going to be using the mono port. This is going to go into the stereo port. So all I'll need to do with this is a quick mod really, and that's remove this heat shrink tubing off here to separate the two wires. So again, they're not, you know, stereo. Put it back in stereo mode, and I've got another one of these, just like the red one. It's the same length. So I'll chop the end off, make sure it's identical length to the red one, and join it up. Put some heat shrink tubing back on there first before I solder it all up. And that should be it. Should be good to go. Should have a stereo lead again. So right, let's get the lid off, and I'll show you what I'm going to do. Right, so I've got a bit of pin header here, you can see that pin header socket. So that's just big enough for 6 pins. And I'm just going to solder that on there. I think if I can get the iron at the right angle. Yeah, should be enough clearance just to get the iron in just down there. Should be able to mount that on top like that. So I'm going to start just with one pin. I'll put a bit of solder on the 6th pin there, and with flux obviously, and then just mount that first pin to hold it. But I'll also put some solder on there, so I'll do the first pin, the 6th pin, then put it in position, solder one pin, make sure it's nice and straight, and then solder the other, and then do the remaining couple of pins that need to be done. I think that's probably the best approach, then I can get it nice and straight. That's not too bad, it's fairly level. It's probably tilting back a bit actually there at the back. Let's just push it down a bit. Yeah, that's not too bad. Right, so the next thing to do, pins 4 and 5, which are the other audio channels, so yeah, this is going to be a bit tricky this. I'd suggest if you've got any capstan tape, sticking some capstan tape around that cap might be an idea. Yeah, that's not so bad. It's not a particularly majorly clean job, that. It really isn't, as you can see, the size of the solder. But what I can do now is put the pin header in there and do some continuity tests too. You can see there's just a bit, I've just turned the board around here. You've got a bit of clearance down there to put your probe pins down, just to make sure you've got connectivity, but you know, as long as that's on there like that, it should be fine. Yeah, so I'm just using a bit of resistor there just to get into the gaps there so that I can test continuity on those 4 pins. Yeah, that's good. It's not particularly, oh, it is okay. I was going to say it's not very stable, but it is. It's the header there that's wobbling around, not the actual socket. So that's good. So what I'm going to do now is just solder the pin header directly into the board at this stage, because then it'll just obviously plug and unplug from the that socket I've just fitted. So I'll just do one pin to start with, just so I can get it nice and straight. Yeah, it's not quite straight at the moment, so I'll just take that pin up. There we go, that's near as damn it, I think. Yep. So now I can do the others. Start with the opposite side. There we go. Good to go. That should now just plug into the board. I'm going to give that a go actually, just to see how long these wires are compared to where the ULA is. yeah, so my understanding is this little board goes this way around like this. At this point I'm going to test the lid just to make sure the lid will fit on as well, so I'll just tuck these in here out the way. And the ULA wires, yeah, clearly not going to have a problem here with this. There's plenty of distance on those. I think I am going to solder directly onto the chip actually there, because it's going to be pretty easy to do, contrary to what I said before. Because if I extend the wires, I'll do some tests. No, I don't know. I might do some continuity tests first, just to see if there's anything else nearby, like one of these chips or a resistor or something, or one of the diodes on the other side. Because if there is something nearby, I'll solder onto that rather than the chip. But other than that, oh, it might just reach underneath actually. If you look at the length of that might reach under the board. Yeah, I think that's going to reach under the board. So yeah, scratch what I've just said. I think that's what I'm going to try and do. That's going to be just long enough, I think. As long as the pins aren't like, I think they're in the middle somewhere, aren't they? Roughly, if we just look at the back of that diagram, yeah, they are. So it's going to either be this end of the chip here, or somewhere this end of the chip here. So, but let's try the case on there first, just make sure it'll fit. Right, that all fits fine in the case. No issues there at all with the clearance on top of that. So I'm going to take this board out now, and I'm going to solder underneath of the ULA rather than onto the chip itself, so just make things a bit easier. It means my ULA is nice and easy to get out there. I'd have to start desoldering wires and things. It's just a bit cleaner, I think, in my opinion. So I've got the board out of there now. Just looking at this ULA, I don't really want to take the heatsink off because I put that on there recently with some fresh heatsink compounds. Quite a snug fit. You can see on the silk screen there, just barely underneath the socket. Yeah, so pin 1's down here. So that should make it easy now to find pin 34 and pin 35. So looking at it from underneath now, that's pin 25 there. So if we go 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, that's pin 34. Now if I just put some solder on there, I'll identify it to me fairly easily. 34 and 35, so yeah, I can't go wrong with that. So if I just stretch the wires underneath here, and I reckon I should be able to just join these up on here quite nicely. There's certainly enough clearance there. So let's do 35 first. It's 35. Now stretch 34 around. I guess this is where some pliers or something probably come in handy. I'll just use my track cutter there, I think, just should help. Oh, it's not going to be enough. Let me get the pliers. Yeah, you want it to get you want a good connection with the pin there. You don't really want it floating over the top of the traces and things if you can help it. So we'll just use the pliers and we can just pull it across a little bit and down. There we go. That's it. I'm comfortable with that. That's going to be okay once the board's back on. Yeah, back in the case and things. Should be enough clearance for that wire underneath because you've got other components and things under there as well. So, not a big deal. So let's just flip that over. Put it back into here. There we go. And I'll just do a continuity test. So pin 34, pin 35. From when it's this way up, just makes it a bit easier. Make sure we've got everything just right. So if we do that one first, where are we going now? So if that's 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, I think. Yeah. So we've got one going to 34, nothing to 35. There we go, that's going to 35. So that should be good to go. Just double check the instructions. Yeah, 34, 35. As you can see, there's enough leeway there with that wire. It's perhaps not quite as long as I would have liked, but it's long enough. It's certainly long enough so that you can actually detach this here. If I was thinking ahead, I probably would have. I might even do it later. Actually, I might put a join in here somewhere. You know, a couple of those type things. You know, a pair of those with a socket on the other end. A bit like that there, just so you can separate them. But the main thing is being able to separate from that chip. That's fine. I'm comfortable with that. At this stage, I think. Well, that's okay. brilliant. I guess it's time to test it probably. And then the final point is to mount these, and it looks like, yeah, you just mount them in this corner here. So there isn't a lot of clearance there actually. Is it the top of the case? Let's just have a look back at the diagram again. Yeah, so we've got one, the bottom, the socket at the bottom, the switch at the top, so it's going to be interesting. Yeah, and the switch is detachable, so that's okay. It means you can separate the top half without an issue. So yeah, I don't think that's going to be a problem really. It's just going to be cutting the hole. And the way I tend to do these things is, you know, line it up first. You know, if you need to get a permanent marker or something, just perhaps put a mark on it, or just visualise. I sometimes just do this by eye. It's going to be a bit tight because of this case here. I'm not really sure how he's got round that in the past. I wonder if he's used a different connector, because there certainly is not enough clearance there to stick a hole through there without damaging the side of that, unless maybe he's damaged that or something to fit it. I don't know. I might rethink where I actually fit that. There's probably enough space, now I think about it, to mount it on top of there. I mean, a really nice mod would have been to reuse this socket somehow, change it to a stereo socket and just wire the fittings to the bottom of the board there. That's certainly a possibility as well. Might do that at a later date. Incidentally, while I'm here, I'll show you something that I noticed the other day. When I first got this, I just forgot to point it out. The way you modulate, this wire comes in here, I think it's probably the composite into the modulator. It's a bit hard to see, but it was actually shorted on one of the joystick ports there. Complete short, so I bent that across, and you know, it's been okay, but who knows what effect that's had on it on the time, you know, in the past. Anyway, right, yeah, one thing I was going to show you is cutting holes in cases. I tend to use one of these, a little track cutter. I mean, obviously drills is what, you know, a drill is what most people would use, but I tend to use my track cutter just to puncture the initial hole there to make a pilot hole, and then just use anything nearby that's sharp. You tend to find that sometimes screwdrivers are the best thing for cutting holes for these switches and things, because if you look at the dimensions of the blade of the screwdriver there compared to that switch, it's pretty much identical. And if it's just a bit too small, then you just step up to the next size screwdriver and you'll find that it's pretty much it's going to give you a perfect size hole. But anyway, that's a nice quick fudge way of doing these things without using a drill. I'd just get laser wheel, I can't bother getting a drill set out and everything. So that's probably how we'll do this. Anyway, let's give it a test. Right, so I've just quickly modified my cable, so it's a stereo cable, and as you can see, I was going to tap the list of programs there. So I've just tapped in that program. Oh shit! And then you could move around like that, and this, I don't know. Right, let's just try and run it. Yeah, that's going left, centre, right, and then the beep. But the thing immediately you'll notice, they're all of the same level, including the beep. It's balanced very well with the OPL output there. Just break that. But the thing is, there's no noise. There was a massive, massive, massive background hiss and noise on this previously when the volume was audible, especially from the OPL stuff. So yeah, really pleased with that. I'm going to load a game now. I'll just load up Wolf and we'll just give that a go with the volume, you know, with things as it is before I reassemble this. Wow, that's a lot better. That's really clear. Really, really clear. Really pleased with that. That's significantly better over the standard, you know, the way these things ship. So the position I'm going for here is the same position that is shown in the diagram there, really, which is here. And as you can see, I'm just using this track cutter, so I'll try and get a better angle just to pilot the hole. So this isn't going to be big enough, almost through. It's not going to be big enough, I don't think, diameter wise. There we go. Just clean all those bits of plastic off. because if you look at the inside of here, if you sort of try and visualise it, it looks like it's at a funny angle there and it won't fit, but when it's pushed all the way through, it should fit reasonably well. Might need to widen it a bit towards the inner side of this here. So but before I do, I think the way I'm going to do that, as I described, you really should use a drill, but if you look at the size of my screwdriver bit there, it's pretty much identical. I can probably use a file just to get that just right, but yeah, so same sort of thing. Use this just to widen the hole, as long as you're careful. Almost there, I think. I'll just use a sharp blade here just to level that off on the inside. There we go. I can do the same sort of thing on the outside in a minute, but at this stage, the easiest way to test things like this is when you do it, is do it the other way around, do it from the opposite side. So that won't quite fit as it stands now, so I'm going to get a needle file onto that. So I've got a round needle file here, and it's just a case of doing a bit of this really all the way around, you know, in circular sort of motion there. Try and widen it the same all directions, just a little bit, and eventually just keep retrying the fit in there, and eventually it should start to fit. A little bit more, I think. So the other thing I've just done here, just take this out, obviously you can take the board out, but you can see I've just shaved off using a little craft knife there, just a little bit of that, in order that when this goes in, it's got sufficient clearance there to be, you can see this, so that it's totally straight. It's, you know, once I got the nut on there, that'll be totally lined up and there's just enough clearance there to get the nut on. So that's not too bad, I'm quite happy with that, pleased the way that's come out. The next thing to do is put a hole in the top of the case here, there, for the switch, so that should be interesting. So there's the end result of the first one. You see it's nicely fitted there, no problems at all, looks nice and clean, and it should fit quite nicely with the lid on there. So I'm just going to do the same thing here. If you look where the audio, the normal audio output is, there, obviously it coincides with that little line there, so I'm thinking of putting the switch potentially over this like that there. Will that fit? Yeah, it will. It's going to be sort of at that position roughly in there, so I'm going to mount it there, so if I cut the hole there now, it should be okay. Right, as you can see there, I've done the switch as well now, so again, that's looking pretty sweet. Same way, you know, pilot hole with the track cutter, small screwdriver to make it bigger, and I used the next size up, which is exactly the right size for one of these switches, and I always use that for these switches. There's the size, if you're interested. So that's it now. This obviously has got its own little connector, so I can just connect that up to the board, connect my keyboard back up, connect my tape deck up again, and reassemble when I'm done. So there we go, all done. Looking pretty sweet there at the back. Stereo, and the switch to switch over the different stereo modes. Yeah, really pleased with that. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.